The Sarah Brett Show
on 5 Live.
Lovely to have your company tonight, as always. In the last half hour, we've been mulling over the day's politics. From the first face-to-face debate of the two men who want to be Prime Minister. Keep sending us your texts, 85058, and at BBC 5 Live on Twitter. My two guests are Rick Edwards and Francis Boulle. This hour, we'll be asking why people believe conspiracy theories like this one.
I had to go with it being flat based on my gut feeling and common sense evidence. Then I was looking around to see who was making a working model of the flat earth.
From flat earthers to anti-vaxxers, are conspiracy theories now rife? And two volunteer Coast Guards have quit after being reprimanded for taking a hypothermic teenager to hospital in their van. I've been speaking to one of them this hour.
This is 5 Live.
The Sarah Brett Show.
First of all, Rick's favourite story of the day, apart from his fat cat, which we'll get on to later.
Yes, please.
July the 20th, 1969, NASA successfully completed its mission to the moon, with Neil Armstrong becoming the first man to set foot on the planet's surface. Or did he?
Exactly.
The idea that the moon landing was somehow faked is one of the bigger conspiracy theories out there, but it is far from the only one. Behind the Curve, which is a documentary also all about so-called flat earthers, was released last year.
First time I ever heard about flat earthers was, I think, when I was in space last. I can't believe I'm talking about this.
I was well versed in just about every conspiracy you can think of.
Chemtrails, 9/11.
Did you know they made up dinosaurs?
I completely solved the JFK assassination, which I'll share with you at a different day.
And then Mark said that he was a member of the Flat Earth Society. And I said, oh, Mark, what are you on to now?
Well, Rick, you reckon that there's been a rise in the number of people getting on board with conspiracy theories?
Yeah, it's sort of initially just anecdotal in that I found myself, I think with the moon anniversary of the moon landings coming up, I found myself not once but twice having a conversation with someone seemingly very normal who said, oh yeah, but I don't really think we did ever go to the moon. And I initially assumed that they were joking, and then you talk to them a bit more, and they're not joking, and they genuinely entertain the idea that it's this phenomenally expensive and incredibly detailed and well-orchestrated hoax.
To what end?
Well, this is kind of fascinating. So one of them said to me,
bearing in mind we've only got till 1 o'clock.
Yeah, okay. So one of them said to me it was all about the sort of assertion
the space race.
Yeah, the space race.
Yeah.
But then effectively you need the Russians to be in on it as well. Yeah. And that feels at that time in history quite a difficult thing to organise. I mean, if you're organising that, it's so much more like the point is really.
Or maybe the Russians were fooled as well.
But then what were the Russians doing? So they were going to space?
Well, I guess they were, they were all trying. I mean, I'm not saying that that's what I believe, but I'm saying I think the reason why probably more normal people are believing that is because there's that big Netflix series all on that specifically. And actually, I did watch it, and I can completely understand why people reasonable people might come to that conclusion.
You can construct these arguments that are quite hard to. Well, actually, people say that the conspiracy theories, one of the threads is that you set up theories that are very hard to falsify. And actually, I don't think that's true. I think you just set up theories and then you are deaf to anything else, and anything that anyone says, you just will quite happily bat off. And you see that in Behind
politics.
the Curve. You certainly see it in politics. Yeah. But you see it have you seen Behind the Curve?
No, I haven't. No, I want to see it.
It's absolutely superb, really, really brilliantly put together. And
so do you not believe in any conspiracy theory?
No, and
none.
No, I don't. And what's kind of fascinating is when people have done.
But surely, how can you not believe that there's never been a conspiracy?
No, so no. There's a difference between a conspiracy and a conspiracy theory.
Oh, no, conspiracy
when you feel like someone is hiding something from you. But then the conspiracy theories are when they come up with these theories to explain what they believe.
Okay, but let's say Watergate. Watergate was a conspiracy theory before it was proved.
I don't think it was.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was.
What people had said.
There was a theory that or the Gulf of Tonkin. Instance.
Right. Okay. The Gulf of Tonkin.
So there are lots of instances where things. I mean, every conspiracy, every proven conspiracy was at one point a conspiracy
Perfect moment to bring in an expert.
Oh, go on, yeah.
Dr. Daniel Jolley, who's probably listening and laughing up his sleeve, senior lecturer at Staffordshire University, and his research focuses on conspiracy theories. That's the job for you, Rick Edwards.
Yeah.
If you need somebody to
The
come
junior
and...
researcher. I'm in.
Junior researcher, Daniel. I have the man for you. So, do you think that there are more, or are they just more accessible?
Well, hi. Yes, indeed, I was listening to your conversation, working behind the secret, and so you said some really great, interesting things. So, with the popularity question, now conspiracies have been around for thousands of years, and they've flourished without the internet. So, researchers found, for example, that in letters to the New York Times between 1897 and 2010. There actually was conspiracy theories in those letters, which shows that conspiracies have been interesting to people, to us, for a very long time.
Why?
It may just seem that there are more in our consciousness, because definitely the internet makes conspiracies travel further and faster. That's definitely something that's argued, but there's no concrete evidence that says they are more popular today. It's potentially as popular as they once were. It's just maybe more easily accessible, which is something that I definitely agree with.
That must be wrong. Because just because people are writing in, if you think about the number of people that are then seeing those letters, far less than now with our incredibly connected world.
There must be more people who are aware.
Yeah, of course there are more people who are aware and buying into conspiracy theories now.
Well, what you find is that people are very selective with what they view and share on the internet.
Yeah.
Typically, it's based on their prior beliefs. So if someone is already endorsing a conspiracy, well, then it's going to polarize that belief system. They're going to be in the community where they talk about that conspiracy. And similarly, those who don't believe are going to be in a community where they don't get exposed to those conspiracies.
But previously,
so the conspiracy can flourish on the internet, but potentially just be in certain communities.
But previously it would have been possible to be someone who is quite open to conspiracy theories, because I think that, generally speaking, correct me if I'm wrong here, if you believe in any of these conspiracy theories, you're very likely to believe in all of them. People don't tend to be selective. If you're that kind of person, you'll go for... Yeah, there's been psychological studies.
That's one of the most consistent findings in psychology, is that if you believe in one conspiracy, you'll
go for all of them.
So,
all of them.
Speaking of psychology, so I think also people are naturally, once they see a conspiracy theory or they suddenly believe it, they're a lot less likely to unbelieve it, right? When people are less likely to change their minds once they've changed it once to believe something.
Absolutely. Conspiracies have been shown to be very resistant to correction. So indeed, once someone is conspiracy theorist, they believe that conspiracy, it's very, very difficult to change their mind. Well, interestingly, earlier you mentioned about normal people believing in conspiracies. And that's exactly what we found, is that it is normal people believing conspiracies for normal, everyday reasons. Now, the stereotype of a tinfoil hat wearer who's paranoid is just a stereotype. Now, people who are paranoid sometimes do believe in conspiracies. That is shown. But there are many, many other reasons. In essence, it's us trying to understand the world, us trying to deal with threat, uncertainty, anxiousness, us trying to have knowledge about what has happened to a princess or an event. So in essence, it's us trying to understand. But we have loads of biases in our mind that can actually cloud our judgment. So, for example, we've got a bias where we think that big events need to be explained by something equally as big. So a princess who just died, well, that must be explained by a conspiracy. It must be the government. It can't be a small, mundane event. So that bias in our mind kicks in when we are exposed to a missing plane, shall we say. We start thinking, well, it must be some big conspiracy here, not just we've got missing.
Do you think the rise in a kind of mistrust of government and the revelations of government corruption and conspiracy,
the constant going on about fake news, which is just everywhere, does that lead to overall kind of mistrust?
Absolutely. So what you find is that certain parts can actually increase that mistrust, that uncertainty, that feeling of threat, which can inspire conspiratorial thinking. So absolutely, it's very context dependent, and it can change in that regard and kind of become more pronounced when we're feeling anxious. Because when we feel anxious, a conspiracy can make us feel better. So that's kind of a positive of conspiracy theories. It can actually help us deal with these feelings. But
how is that good if it's not true? It's not. Is that surely it's better to know the truth and believe the truth and be informed?
I think that's a very good point, and that leads on to the point of I think they're quite appealing, but not necessarily satisfying. Because you may feel less anxious when you subscribe to a conspiracy initially, but then you start thinking, well, what else have they done? What else is the government conspiring about? Which could further actually increase someone's mistrust towards
and then there
different
are
groups of people.
Really quite, to say the least, unpalatable things, which I don't know if this is a long-standing thing, but what is called the false flag, Daniel. Like, for example, Sandy Hook, massacre of children.
Tonkin is one of those, right?
Absolutely. I mean, a massacre of children at a primary school, and there are thousands of people that believe that did not happen and hounded the families of these children out of the place where they lived. I mean, how does that differ from the traditional conspiracy theory? And is that not absolutely a proponent of the world in which we live in and driven by the internet?
I think it's very much driven by the same variables of them trying to understand what has happened and then maybe having that mistrust of information that they're being given. And indeed, there can be many, many different consequences of conspiracy theories. That is a real kind of perfect example of how conspiracy thinking can be quite dangerous. How we've shown in research that those who believe in conspiracy theories are more likely to accept violence towards those who are part of the conspiracy. So it indeed could be those families, it could be the government more generally. But of course, it can impact other behaviour, such as to do with vaccines, climate change. Interestingly, research done recently has shown that people who are more likely to believe in conspiracies are more likely to accept and behave in an ethical way. So they're more likely to engage in low-level crime. That may sound strange initially, but we propose that if we believe others are conspiring, others are involved in plots and schemes, well then why can't I also get involved in plots and schemes? So it can have wide-ranging consequences, from violence right up to disengagement with vaccines and climate change.
Guys, if you've got ones that you want to ask Daniel about, and I'm sure you absolutely do, drum some up for me, but I just want to ask you this one, all of you actually, because Mark in Leeds has texted on 85058, says, what do all of your guests think of the JFK assassination?
In what sense?
In time for 1 o'clock. Again,
I think it's amazing how
it's
maintained, how that conspiracy is maintained through time. Because sometimes conspiracies come into fashion and they move out very quickly.
So why has that one stayed, Daniel? Why has that stayed then?
It's stayed because it has kind of perfect ingredients where it's based around a major event. So that's one ingredient. The conspirators are actually quite a tangible group. They're tightly formed and they kind of make sense. A conspiracy that doesn't really have kind of a conspirator doesn't really make sense. So I think that kind of fits in, and the context. So it came at a time when people were pretty anxious. It stayed in people's consciousness. So that's kind of stayed in our beliefs. So it'd be interesting to see other conspiracies that are around today. So like the flat Earth, for example. Will that still be here in 60 years? That's kind of interesting to think about. But it's kind of the perfect ingredients of a conspiracy has the JFK one.
Yeah, I think I take a bit of a more nuanced view of conspiracy theories, because I think it's almost more absurd than believing the sort of flat Earth and ridiculous conspiracy theories to just dismiss all conspiracy theories out of hand. I mean, like, we know that governments have conspired, to commit various kinds of crimes, like various nefarious things. So I think you have to if you just approach every conspiracy theory as obviously untrue because you want to project some image of being reasonable and not some tinfoil hat-wearing guy, then obviously then actual genuine conspiracies are going to go unchallenged, right?
But I think that the thing is that almost without exception, the conspiracy theories, the kind of thing that I'm thinking about, do not hold up against any scrutiny. I'm not suggesting that you have to approach everything.
The MK Ultra, for example, that was a conspiracy theory, and that's been proven. The declassified documents saying that they were testing out LSD, trying to manipulate people and create these kinds of sleeper agents that they could trigger to go and commit assassinations and things like that. That's been shown and declassified. I mean, that was a conspiracy theory, but now it's not. Now it's a
Manchurian Candidate kind of stuff, Daniel. Is that? I actually don't know that one. Is that the case? Do you know that one?
I don't know exactly much about that conspiracy, to be honest.
Just type Google MK Ultra. You can.
Daniel, are you living in an echo chamber of your own anti-conspiracy theory?
I think it's important to question things. I think that's the absolute key.
Yeah.
Is that it's instilling critical thinking skills in people, young people, to question information. The problem, I think, is that conspiracies are so influential that when people are exposed to them on Twitter, for example, it can change their beliefs without them realising. It has a real kind of strong impact on us because they're controversial, they're interesting. So if someone is just being exposed to that conspiracy and not thinking about it, they could end up in that echo chamber where that becomes their belief. So I think what's more important is that people can stop and think about the evidence, can weigh it up. So maybe teaching people about, different types of evidence. The internet will help in people thinking about these different types of conspiracies and fake news and etc.
I feel less and less equipped to be able to judge as an individual and as a journalist. It's like the older I get, the more I know, the less I know, if you know what I mean. And in this era of fake news, and when we're constantly told that we are being manipulated by our own news feeds or whatever, it's just so hard to get to the I think Brexit has quite a lot to do with this as well, but it's so hard to get to the truth of things that I actually feel less equipped now than I ever did to be able to distinguish even with critical thinking what is fact and what is fiction.
There's a perfect kind of reflection that it is so challenging, that we're demonstrating that conspiracies are widespread, they're believed for normal reasons, but they can have some real serious consequences on a range of behaviours. So our timely question is, what can we do when they are so challenging to actually debunk and think about and etc. So it's a question I haven't got the full answer to. We know, for example, that when people feel more empowered, they're less likely to believe in conspiracies. When people are primed to think more, at least more critical, they're less likely to believe in conspiracies. So potentially there's some kind of work that can be done around this to try and think, okay, what tangibly can be put together to try and increase these skill sets that may actually have a positive impact on this, without obviously stopping people thinking.
I'm sure your research will improve no end when Rick joins your team.
Looking forward to it. Very much looking forward to it. I'll start on Monday.
Daniel, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank
really,
you so much.
Genuinely fascinating. And thank you. Dr. Daniel Jolley, who's a senior lecturer at Staffordshire University. How interesting. If you feel more empowered, you're less likely to believe it. But if you're feeling a bit vulnerable and a bit, you might.
Well, I guess
that just means sheer bloody mind.
That makes sense.
That makes sense.
Also, people who are happy and
that's not critical thinking, though, is it? That's I know my stuff. So
but if they're happy and they're successful, they're kind of just they're happy to keep perpetuating their own life and their status quo. They have no interest in I mean, unless they're like investigative journalists or someone where that is their job, right? And investigative journalist's job is to investigate conspiracy theories, right? Investigate conspiracies.
Have you seen Lions for Lambs, the movie?
No, I haven't.
I don't know. It's mixed reviews, really. Meryl Streep, Robert Redford, Tom Cruise, about pulling the wool over the eyes of journalists in a time of it's just sort of Afghanistan war thing.
Right.
But anyway, I thought it was dead good, but about how even journalists, even seasoned investigative journalists now just are having the wool pulled over their eyes by government. So
I think there is a real sense in Behind the Curve. You get a very clear picture that these are people who just desperately want to be part of a community, and they're all really getting something from it. And to be fair, with the flat Earth stuff, they're really not doing anyone any harm. And I came away from it feeling quite warmly towards all of them. Thinking good luck to them.
Do you think that something so ludicrous as a conspiracy about the Earth being flat actually does more to help those who are actually conspiring, because it discredits anyone who might accuse them of such?
Oh, so by grouping it, like you group all conspiracy theories and you kind of use that as the headline one,
exactly.
And therefore they're all...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's true. The danger, which I think was your point, is that you suddenly go, I'm going to discount all sort of slightly outlandish
because holding government to
things,
account and investigating potential conspiracies is something that's important to keep
vital.
It is vital to ensure democracy and freedom and civil liberties and
like my future employer was saying, questioning is the thing. You've got to question.
You've got to have a critical mind, definitely.